I pulled up in Louie's front yard with my last exchange. The bag contained something called pixie dells, which were about the size of a fingernail clipping. The little creatures had wanted a funeral last week, and it had been about the cutest thing that I have ever done. The coffin was from a doll set, which was morbid in all sorts of ways, and the benches, flowers, and little podium came from a non-Barbies line of Baptist dolls, which was convenient. The whole thing cost about $500 to arrange, complete with one guy from Cerberus standing there and looking menacing. Apparently the little fairy guys, some kind of human-fairy hybrids, which raised even more questions, had cried and bawled and thanked me for my trouble and promised to send me more business. One of them had tipped a bag of these pixie dells into my hand and flown off with a shower of fairy dust as they took the coffin off to wherever they meant to intern him. I had been fascinated with the little things after that, breaking out my old microscope to have a look at them. They were these perfectly round little things that were all but transparent, and all 1,500 of them had fit into an old contact case that I had sitting around. I had snugged both of them equally between the two caps, and was hoping for a decent exchange on them. My phone chirped before I could climb out, and I checked it with an audible groan. It was Tinder, and I already knew it, and I opened it up to see the expected message from the night's intended date. Something came up, I'm on my period, my cat's on fire. It was all the same. Anyone who's single knows that modern dating right now is the absolute worst. And I can't really think of the last time that I had something a little more creative as an excuse, but it was still annoying to have my dates constantly flake out on me. I had been getting ready to drive the 2 hours to Mansley and pay for Red Lobster when she had sent me a message in the first inning that we'd be rained out. And so I climbed out of my car in a foul mood as I walked up the sidewalk. I was on the porch, reaching for the bell, when someone came out the door. I thought that it might be Louie's mom for a moment, but this woman was considerably younger than the woman that I usually saw answering the door. She was tall, her skin hinting at something Spanish, maybe Mediterranean, with long dark hair and a face that looked slightly younger than it should have. It did little to dull her beauty, and when she turned back to plant a kiss on Louie, I felt my jaw drop. She looked poured into those booty shorts in that crop top, and one of those spaghetti straps was dangling from a tanned shoulder.
Gracias, mi amor. Me divertí. Te veo la próxima semana.
You know it,
He said, giving her a smack on the ass as she walked away giggling.
Dress nice. We're going shopping, remember?
I felt a pang of jealousy as it all played out. Apparently, someone was getting some on the regular. How Louie had managed to net a babe like that was beyond me. But I seethed a little as she turned around and noticed me. She smiled, excusing herself, but that was when I got a good look at her eyes. And when she looked at me, I saw that they were vertical, like a cat's, and they were the most beautiful shade of gold and amber that I had ever seen. A woman like that could steal a soldier from the sea. She seemed to notice how I was looking at her, and when she blinked, her eyes were the normal human direction, though the color stayed. She wiggled up the sidewalk, turned left, and walked down the sidewalk towards town. I wanted to offer her a ride, but I was powerless to do much else but watch as she walked away.
Hey,
Someone said, snapping until I shook that look away.
I asked that you not ogle my sugar baby in front of me. She's extremely attractive, but it's considered rude to eye-bang some guy's girl right in front of him.
I shook my head and turned back to find Louie standing there, looking like a drug dealer from a 90s movie. He had his greasy hair pulled back into a ponytail, a bathrobe covering him, but still open to reveal he was bare other than a pair of leopard print Speedo underwear. And despite what he'd said, he looked extremely pleased with himself and was unable to take his eyes off either as she walked away. Does she... I asked as I cleared my throat. Does she need a ride? I would hate to see her walk.
Yeah, you look like you really hate watching her walk away.
Louis said, reaching out to close my mouth.
She only needs to go as far as the nearest waterway.
Waterway? I asked, not picking up what he was putting down.
She's a nymph, dude. A river nymph, to be precise. All bodies of water are her home.
He walked inside, figuring that I would follow. And as I came in on his wake, I got curious. So, how'd you guys meet? Not every day you just meet a water nymph. Louis shrugged.
On the app, of course.
App? I asked. Don't tell me that these kind of girls are on Tinder as well. Louis snorted.
Tinder's for humans. You and I walk in different circles. You want ladies like that? You gotta get on Monster Mash.
Monster Mash? I asked. Louis rolled his eyes and motioned me into the basement. We came down the stairs and into his little subterranean kingdom before he took his phone out and showed me. It was set up similarly to Tinder, but with some subtle differences.
Look.
He showed me.
You can sort by size, species, compatible interests, sexual interest, all kinds of things. Looking for a hot single Minotaur in the area? They got that. Looking for some surf and turf with a mermaid? Hey, they got that too. Pixies, nixies, nymphs, dryads, half-dragons, full dragons. If you're into that kind of thing. Ghouls, hags, gorgons, you name it, they got it.
I couldn't help but scrolling through it a little, looking at the profiles of some of these girls, and found myself getting a little excited. There was so much of the other world that I simply didn't know about, and it seemed like the more that I discovered, the more I liked. He took my phone and downloaded it, having to verify a few things before he did, and when he handed it back to me, I had a new profile to fill out. Wait, I said, looking up dubiously. They aren't going to care that I'm human, are they? Louis laughed.
No more than they do that I'm human. Some of these girls like the idea of dating a human. To them, we're exotic. Most of them make us look like a pile of dog shit by comparison, but they still like to slum it with us from time to time. Word of advice, though,
he said as I finished filling in my profile.
Let people know where you are. Be careful with anything that has that icon on the profile,
he said as he tapped a pretty dark-haired girl with fangs on the corner of her profile. Why? 'Cause she's a vampire? That seems kind of messed up.
Nah, 'cause she consumes human flesh. That girl's a ghoul. She literally eats people to survive, so that sign lets humans know that it might not be a good idea to go on a date. Trust me, it's easy to end up as dinner on one of these dinner dates, if you ain't careful. Most of them are fine, though, just looking for some companionship. You know Malcolm and his son, don't you? Maybe go on some double dates with Cornelius until you're used to the app.
Wait, Cory uses Monster Mash? And Louis laughed.
Yeah, think it's mostly so his dad won't lean on him so much. Long as he sees him stepping out with something vaguely feminine, stays off his case. I'd offer to double up with you, but it's not why I use it.
Why do you use it?
I'm, into being a sugar daddy for women in need of financial benefactors. They sleep with me, but we both know the relationship is mostly transactional. Speaking of,
he said, holding out his hand for what I had brought for him. It didn't take long, and Louis knew more about these kinds of currencies than anyone. Then pretty soon, I was walking out about $5,000 more richer with something new to occupy my attention. In the past, I had been a little free with my right swipes. But on Monster Mash, I suddenly became a detective when it came to picking people to date. I had spent the whole day just exploring it before I got around to swiping at all. I discovered that there were other tags besides the People Eater one. There were also the cold-blooded tags for hybrids or reptilian descent, toxic for creatures with poisonous or acidic skin, which was a shame because there was a very cute, slimy girl in my county. Don't judge. The only thing that sucked is they were likely to eat any offspring that you might have had. Mantle, if they were likely to eat you after intercourse, and the tags went on and on. The species list held some that I knew and some that I had never heard of before. Things from regional legends and myths that I had never run up against. And after 2 days of looking and exploring, I started making some tentative matches. I was careful to avoid anything that might eat me before or after sex, and settle on a few that looked down to earth. One was a forest nymph named Naomi, who seemed simple but alluring. Then there was Tara the Minotaur, who seemed to be more interested in hooking up than a relationship, but she did have a lot of similar interests to mine. Third, there was Gwen, whose profile said that she was a lady of the lake, whatever that was. She was looking for, quote, someone special, and was a little vague on the particulars. I mostly swiped on her because I thought that she was cute, in a Ren Fair nurse kind of way, and wanted to know more about her. She wanted to meet that night, and to my surprise, which worked out because Tara wasn't free until the weekend and Naomi was busy Sunday. I didn't have any upcoming funerals to plan, and I told Gwen that I would meet her that night if she was local. She said that she would come to me, and I suggested a steakhouse in town for our first rendezvous. She approved, and I went to see what I had that was still good enough to wear on a date to the Ponderosa Steakhouse. I came out in khakis, a nice polo, and my loafers, which would be considered typical church clothes if I went to church. "Oh, look who's all dolled up," Mom said, smiling from behind the stove. "I guess I shouldn't expect you for dinner then." Nope. Got myself a date," I said, smiling more than I meant to. Mom clapped her hands. "Oh, good for you, hun. Is she a local girl? Anyone that I may know?" I didn't really want to tell Mom that I was using an app for dating, especially not a dating site for hybrids, so I just said, no, just someone I met online. "Well, that's terrific, dear," she said, wrapping me in a hug. "I'm so glad that you are finally coming out of your shell and giving a relationship a chance. It's always hard on a mortician if he doesn't have a partner. Your father always said it made people hesitant to deal with them sometimes, at least in his day and age. I suppose people are a little more open-minded now, though." And without too much thought about that, I kissed her on the top of her head and told her that I'd see her later as I headed out. The Ponderosa was a town staple. It didn't technically have a dress code, but it was well known for being a place that people came to eat after church or for semi-formal events. Ponderosa came with a high price as well, but it was worth it. I was still flush with cash from my little fairy funeral, so I could easily treat Gwen to a couple of steaks and a side. It was packed when I got there, but she was easy to pick out of the crowd. I thought that maybe what she was wearing in her picture was cosplay, but I soon found out that it was just her everyday attire. She did in fact kind of look just like a nun, her blonde hair spilling past a veil that hid her face, save for her mouth. She had laid what appeared to be a duffel bag across the table, and when I came up and asked if she was Gwen, she nodded and pointed to the chair across from her. A little weird, but I guess maybe that she was shy or something. The people around us were trying to be polite, but she was garnering quite a lot of looks. Maybe I should have picked somewhere a little less crowded. Maybe I should have taken her somewhere quieter for our first date. But I told myself that I was overthinking it. But it was hard for me to stop my brain from doing what it was doing in these kind of situations. "Sorry if the place is a little too crowded," I said, picking up the menu. "But, get whatever you want, though. I'm paying, so go ahead and go nuts."
"Water's fine,"
she said, and her voice kind of sounded like half of a hiss. It reminded me of someone who's been resuscitated after nearly drowning, and there was a watery quality to her voice that I just couldn't shake. It also was a little off-putting not being able to see her eyes, too, and I cleared my throat as the waitress arrived. "Are you sure?" And when she nodded, I told the lady that I'd have a 12-ounce sirloin, medium rare, with potatoes and mac and cheese, as well as sweet tea to drink. She nodded and looked at Gwen, who reiterated that water was fine. The girl looked at me sympathetically, clearly figuring I was on a date going poorly from the jump, and went to put in my order. So with her gone, Gwen gave me her full attention again. "So, your profile ad said that you were looking for someone special. I was just curious and kind of wanted to know what that meant exactly." Are you looking for a husband, or...
I am seeking he who will wield the sword.
She said, taking a slow sip from her glass.
A king who was promised with the fall of Arthur. I seek his blood descendant, the true king of Camelot.
I stared at her like a deer in the headlights, waiting for her to start laughing and say that it had all been a joke. And as the seconds stretched on, I was really waiting for that moment. I started, not sure of how to respond to that.
I noticed you take your steak medium rare, and you favor potatoes with it. Arthur always ate his potatoes boiled, but I think the distinction is negligible. How's your swordsmanship? Have you ever felt moved to lead men to battle or slay your enemies from horseback? Are you prone to gallantry, acts of selflessness, or heroism? Have you ever taken an ancestry test? Where do your people hail from?
As she asked the questions, she edged a little more towards me, and I was aware that her face covering her wasn't as solid as I thought. The fabric, as she leaned closer, gave me a great view of her large, milky eyes that seemed to see more than I wanted them to. Her breasts heaved the front of her outfit, and as she attempted to come across the table, the stares became a little more common.
Sir, will you place your hands on the sword and accept its judgment? If you be Arthur, you could take me to your kingly bed this very evening and know pleasures beyond any you have ever experienced.
No thanks, I said, backing into the cushioned seat as far as I could go. I'm not really into whatever this is. I was out of the booth and making for the door, leaving her crouched over the table like a hunting cat as the patrons watched and likely judged us for the display. I was back in the car in a heartbeat, trying to get the keys into the ignition. What the hell was that? I guess since people didn't make any habit of coming around bodies of water like they used to, the ladies had to be creative with dispensing swords and kingly titles. There was a knock at the window, and I jumped as I looked and I found Gwen standing beside my car with a large and ornate sword in her hand.
Take up the sword,
she said, raising it above her head.
Fulfill your birthright.
Lady, my people were Irish. Or Italian? Anyway, no way is anyone going to make me the King of England. And with that, I peeled out of the parking lot and left her standing there as people stood at the windows and watched our exchange from a safe distance. She was still standing there as I drove home, looking after me with a dwindling sense of hope. I hoped that they wouldn't call the police on her, but maybe she'd find her king in lockup, who knows. I got home just after sunset and decided to go sit in my office rather than return to break my mom's heart. Plus, I didn't really want to go to bed yet, and I certainly didn't want to linger and talk about it. It was a bad date. I'd had those before, but that one was worse than usual. If that was any indication of what I had to look forward to on Monster Mash, then Tinder dates flaking at the last minute seemed like a picnic. I was walking through the showroom, mind still racing, when I heard something in the storeroom and stopped to investigate. And when Cory came out, stalking my weekly delivery, I think we scared each other enough to put us in fear of a heart attack. Oh, Jesus, sorry, man, I said as my galloping heart calmed down a little. I had completely forgot that it was Friday.
It's okay,
Cory said.
I'd have probably just swiped some bag blood and passed it off as yours anyway. Dad's been getting sloppy lately, so might take him a while to realize it's not the real deal,
he said with a grin. No, I said, getting comfortable as I watched him unload. A deal's a deal. I'll have to leave myself a reminder that I need to be available on the Fridays so that way you can get paid.
What's got you in the office so late anyway?
He asked as he stepped through the doors and carried a fresh coffin in by himself.
You usually knock off about now for dinner.
I kinda had a date, I said, brightening a little as I remembered what Louie had told me. Oh, Cory, aren't you on Monster Mash too? I was sorry a moment later as I heard him drop the coffin and look at me in surprise.
I am? Are you?
He asked skeptically. Yeah. Louie told me about it. He said that I might have an easier time finding someone to actually date on there than by my usual means. Cory was giving the coffin a once-over, looking for damage before he put it on the riser in the showroom and came out to get another one.
Louie,
he said with a snort.
Yeah, I've seen his profile. We aren't exactly looking for the same things on that app. Are you a premium member? You know, there's an event coming up for premium members next week.
I didn't even know there was a premium membership, I said, following him down to the prep room.
Isn't there always?
He said, putting the box down with a heavy puff of dust.
It's only $15 a month, and it gets you invites to their events. I think the one coming up is speed dating, but it's always fun. Have you gone on any dates yet?
I told him about Gwen as he unloaded, and by the end, he was laughing.
I got a message from a lady of the lake once when we matched. She told me I was, and I quote, an abomination that was unworthy of holding the blade of Arthur, and that she would pray for my eternal soul. As far as rejection messages go, that one was pretty nice.
We talked about dating a little as he drew my blood, and I had to laugh as Cory scrunched up his face when the needle went in.
The worst are the groupies, the monster girls who read Anne Rice or watch Twilight and decide that they just have to have a vampire boyfriend. I don't even go out in the sun, not that I could, so I'm something of a disappointment to them. They want a muscular vampire boyfriend with a six-pack and a tragic backstory, not a basement-dwelling anime nerd who's pale because he never leaves the house.
Hey man, don't sell yourself short. I'm sure that you have a lot to offer someone, I said, trying not to swoon as the lightheadedness hit me like a truck.
Thanks for saying so.
Taking out the needle as he got his fill and holding the padding on till the wound clotted.
Hopefully it goes better for you than it does for me. Dad wants me to do well, but I just don't think women find me as worldly as him. I'm not as suave, not as confident, not as handsome, not as...
He said, searching for something else, so I supplied it. Cocky, full of himself, kind of an asshole. And Cory laughed.
Yeah, maybe. If you decide you want to sign up for the premium service, let me know and we can ride together to the event. It'd be nice to have someone to go with.
Sure, why not? I said, holding out my phone so he could show me how to do it. It's a date. When I pulled up to the spot that Naomi had indicated on Sunday, I thought that I had made a mistake. The park was full of protesters, bearing signs about not cutting down trees for parking lots, and they seemed to be staving off a group of construction workers. They had a bulldozer positioning to get the old huge tree that was sitting in the middle of the protest. There was a girl chained to the tree, holding a pair of signs decrying deforestation, and I looked at Naomi's instructions again. Look for the big tree in the middle of the field. I'll be there. I had dressed for a hike when she invited me to the park, and that had probably been a good call. I would fit right in with the college kids who were protesting, even though I really didn't care, and paired and walked around the side of them as I made my way towards the tree. They didn't question me, and they handed me a sign and thanked me for coming out to help. Yeah, okay. It seemed I wasn't the first person to walk in on their protest, and I made my way to the tree where the woman chained to it was looking up expectantly. Naomi? I asked, offering her water by way of greeting. She looked very hot. In both ways, because not only was she very attractive, but her face was red as a tomato, and she took the water gladly.
Who? No, I'm Kat, but thank you for the water.
She drained it in a single long drink, and then dropped it as she went right back to yelling and chanting, which I kind of thought was interesting. Glittering, but then crying about deforestation. Anyway, psst, came a voice from behind the tree, and I looked up to see a face as it slid along the back and towards the back of the old tree. I followed it, and when it stopped, it smiled at me.
I'm Naomi,
she said, and I had to practically put my ear to my mouth to hear her.
Sorry, when I agreed to this date, I thought this would be over by now. I certainly didn't think these guys were going to start chaining themselves to me. I would have quietly disappeared if they hadn't, but now I'm stuck until the dozers start rolling. They're going to be in for a shock when I turn into a dryad and start running with or without this girl hooked to me.
So, what do you want to do about our date? I asked, moving my mouth close so that she could hear me.
I guess we have to reschedule. I'll message you when this blows over. You seem nice, and I still want to get to know you, but I have to finish this up right now.
She kissed my cheek, and I was left to slip quietly back to the car after leaving my sign behind on the tree. 2 for 3. Not a great sign so far. So, are you still planning to attend the Wednesday event? Cory sounded grumpy, but he tried to hide it.
Mortician, do you know what time it is?
It's, God, it's 2 p.m., Cory. Aren't you guys normally getting up around this time?
No, not usually,
He said with a yawn.
Yeah, I'm still planning to go. Did you want a carpool?
Definitely. Walking through the small fair they were having at the farm Tara had told me to meet her at. I'm 0 for 2 so far, so unless this gal really knocks it out of the park, I'll be going to that thing on Wednesday.
Super. Can I go back to bed now?
I told him to get some sleep, and we hung up. I was coming up on the entrance to the hedge maze, something that seemed to be growing on the property for some time, when a husky voice called my name, and I turned around to see a barely disguised woman. Her height alone toppled her at nearly 7 foot, whose grin was hidden behind her big metal nose ring. She was dressed in overalls and not really much else, which was how I could tell that her nose ring wasn't the only thing that was pierced. She had her hands on her hips, her short blonde hair cut into something punky, and when she nodded towards the maze, I walked over with what I hoped was a confident stride. Tara? I said, and she snorted.
Yeah, come on. My break's short and I want to get started.
I saw her hang a sign across the entrance of the maze, and as we proceeded in, she took my hand and led the way. So, are you running the maze? I asked as we hurried through it.
Yeah, I'm pretty good at mazes,
she said with a wink. Do they know that you're, I started, but even as I said it, I saw the horn come creeping through her hair, and her actual muscly form took an extra layer of muscle. She became, well, not furrier, but definitely more bristly. Her hands were mostly unchanged, but the hair on her skin was like that of a boar. It was a little bit wild to watch, and I realized that she had glamored herself somehow so that way that she could live amongst the humans. We came to the middle of the maze, and she looked around before flicking the stamps on her overalls, showing me what I had suspected as the overalls fell around her waist.
Drop 'em, little man. I don't have long, and I want to enjoy myself.
Now, I was a little speechless, not at the prospect of performing out here, but at the sadness of the offer. We hadn't discussed anything like this, but I had no time to argue. She dropped down, fingers working the button as she pushed me back against the soft bit of the hay someone had spread there. Then she was crawling forward, her eyes sultry.
First time with someone like me? Don't be nervous. Just grab my horn, big boy, and let's ride.
And so, despite getting my dates through the app, I'm still a gentleman. And I don't kiss and tell. About half an hour later, we both fell back on the hay, panting and sore. Well, at least I was. Tara shrugged back into her overalls, which had never fallen lower than her ankles the whole time, and spared me a glance as she snapped them back on. She was walking back into the maze, leaving me in the afterglow, when I called out and stopped her. Do you... I panted, trying to catch my breath. Want to get a coffee or something? Tara looked confused.
Why? We're done here, right? You got what you needed, and I got what I needed.
But I thought... And she smiled and tossed her head a little.
Look, big fella, it was nice, and I think we both needed the release, but it's over now. We're not going to get married and raise a herd of little cows, so there's no sense in dragging it out. It was fun, but we're done. Don't put more on it than there was already.
I sighed, pulled my pants up before I traumatized some family out for some maze walking, and I left. I really needed to update my profile, though I was still going to count this one as a win.
And she just left you in the maze?
Cory said, trying not to laugh as he drove us towards the spot hosting the event. Yeah, I confided. So then I had to find my way back out again. It took me close to about a half an hour to get back out, and then she just laughed at me. Cory tried not to laugh.
Yeah, some of them are like that. Certain species just want to smash and dash. I hooked up with a werewolf a couple of months ago and fell hard. She, however, was only interested in a quickie, and it kind of put her off when I got clingy.
Isn't that, kind of taboo-ish? Vampires and werewolves? I mean, I've seen Underworld. Cory snorted.
It's just in the movies. There's no real rivalry outside of Hollywood, and some werewolves like taking a vampire lover since we can keep up with them.
We pulled up outside of what was either a very upscale gentleman's club we pulled up outside of what was either an upscale gentleman's strip bar or a sleazy looking club, and Cory parked his car and got out. It's still wild to me that you drive, I said, shaking my head at his powder blue Prius. Cory cocked an eyebrow.
Why is that?
I mean, well, you always just kind of show up at the mortuary.
Yeah, in Dad's box truck. Have you never looked out in the parking lot while I'm in there?
Cory shook his head and laughed.
Man, that's kind of racist, Mortician. What was I gonna carry you to the event in my little back claws?
We both walked in laughing, and as we came to the front of the line, I saw the big guy in the black t-shirt at the end of it stick a hand out.
Good evening, gentlemen. I trust you're on the list.
Take your phone out,
Cory whispered as I opened the app to hit a couple of buttons and then did the same.
We're here for the event. Here's our invitations.
The bouncer scanned the screen, looked at us, and lifted the rope to let us in. The guys in the line made some angry noises, but the bouncer glared at them and they settled down. We walked in and amidst the steady thrum of dance music and approached the bar. Cory showed his phone to the bartender and he pointed us towards a side door where we flashed our phones again, and then we were given a couple of blood-red armbands with MM on them. Then we went down to the back hall and into what appeared to be a second, smaller club with a bar and a bunch of tables set up to facilitate the event. The room was packed with creatures of all sort, and I even saw a few humans amongst them as I grabbed a name tag off the table. Cory started to write his full name before he threw it away and grabbed another one which he wrote Cory on. I wrote Tyler on mine and affixed it to my shirt as we went to mingle. Cory looked at it for a moment before laughing again, and it was the most at ease that I think that I had ever seen the vampire. What?
It's just, I've been calling you Mortician this whole time, and I always forget that you have a name instead of just a title. I don't think Dad even knows what your name is. All your invoices just say Mortician on them.
Well, you can call me Tyler if you like. I consider us friends after all, and Tyler is generally what my friends call me. Cory seemed to like that, and it made me wonder how many people had offered him the same courtesy.
Good evening, ghouls and goblins, and welcome to the Monster Mash Speed Dating Event!
There were general applause, and Cory went off to the bar to get us a couple of drinks.
Your profile should have a table on it for where you should start at.
The announcer called, and Cory came back with a whiskey in one hand and a blood-red substance in the other.
When your phone chimes, head to that table and meet your match. You'll have 5 minutes with each of your matches, and then you'll be given a new table to move to. Be quick, be suave, and most of all, be ready!
More applause and cheers, and Cory and I took our phones to see where we would be going.
I got 13.
Cory said, looking for the number amongst the 30 or so tables.
What'd you get?
17, I said, picking it out pretty quickly. And as our phones chimed and the crowd began to move, Cory nodded at me and wished me luck. And thus began a whirlwind of women, words, and buzzers. First came the fawn. She was cute, her freckles standing out as white drops on her muzzle and her curly hair withered with wildflowers. Her eyes were so green that they looked like a scummed-over pond, and she looked shyly at me as we began. The tables had cards on them and to help us get started. And as we began, I got a little smile and a very low, "Hello." Now see, the problem was that she was a little too shy. Most of her answers were either monosyllabic or mumbled too low for me to hear. I learned her name was Farah, and she liked green, her favorite food was grass, especially from sunny meadows. Her questions came out with a lot of mumbling, and as she looked away, it was like pulling teeth to get any feedback. It was almost a mercy when the timer went off, and I headed straight towards... "Oh, hell no," I said. But Victoria reached out to catch my trailing hand before I could walk away.
I know we got off on the wrong foot, Mortician, but I promise this is all just speed dating. I've no ulterior motives behind this meeting.
And so I dropped heavily into my seat, giving her a less than believing look. Why would a succubi even need a dating app, let alone need to go to speed dating? She leaned in closer, grinning at me as she chewed her pinky nail.
Oh, is that your opening question?
I just leaned back and glared at her, tapping the card of questions on the table until she finally rolled her eyes and sat back as well.
Sometimes it's nice to meet people you don't have to sleep with. Everyone sees a succubi and just assumes we're only interested in sex. Sometimes we just want to go out and have a nice time, you know?
I nodded, dropping some of my defenses. Yeah, I guess I can understand that. All right, I guess it's your turn.
What color are your underwear?
She purred, and it was my turn to roll my eyes. Black, I said, moving right along. Is your sister here too?
That's not a real question.
She pouted.
No, Talia doesn't subscribe to the idea that you can have a real relationship. She's completely drank the Kool-Aid on the whole succubi lifestyle.
But not you. And she waggled a finger at me.
Not fair. It's my turn. What's your ideal woman?
And I had to stop and blink, because that was oddly specific. Well, I guess someone who supports me, not necessarily financially, but, is there for me. Sometimes it gets lonely working with the dead, and I'd like someone warm to come home to. Someone that can really help me make a house a home. Someone that I can connect with on some sort of level. I'm not saying that we have to have everything in common, but, some things. Just somebody to be my person, And when she reached across the table to cover my hands with hers, I looked up in surprise.
Sounds like we really aren't that different then,
she said, giving me an honest smile for once. Yeah, maybe. So what about you? Who's your ideal person? She hadn't taken her hand away, and I turned mine to hold hers. Perhaps I misjudged her.
I guess I want the same. I want someone who sees me for me, not just some sex kitten always looking for the cream, but a person who wants someone to make me forget all that. The succubi thing, it's just a job. I want somewhere where I can go to turn it off, somewhere where I can be normal, and...
She pulled her hand back, but slowly.
I don't think that can be with you.
We smiled at each other, mine a little confused.
It's my fault. I was pretty aggressive. I don't think I'll be able to forget the things that I put you through either.
I shrugged. Well, it doesn't mean that we can't be friends, I offered, our phones going off to let us know that time was up. And she nodded.
I'd like that.
We parted ways then, And I'm sorry to say that Victoria's sex pest was the best interaction that I had that night. Next came a ghoul who made vile connotations about eating me. Then came the Kelpie, who was more interested whether I had a big enough tub for us to bang in. And, get this, the Minotaur that I mentioned earlier. Yeah, she was there again, but still was interested in little more than a smash and dash. And then there was a mermaid who got offended when I expressed that I preferred my fish sautéed, and a fae of some kind or another who kept offering me acorns and seeds for my bones, which was weird, like for all of my bones. I really wanted to leave after that, because it appeared that dating monsters was just as hard as it was to date humans. I guess I should have seen that coming. If my clients had taught me anything, it should be that they were just like normal folk. They had their own problems, their own struggles, as well as their own goals. I went to a wall out of sight of tables and just slid down it. I was tired, demoralized, and ready to just accept my life alone. But that was when I noticed someone looking at me. She was across the way, not really within view of the action, but I could feel that her eyes were on me. And they didn't feel malicious, but it did feel odd. It's that feeling that you get when someone is staring at you, and it seemed that she wasn't blinking. She looked normal enough, but when I saw the armband, I knew that she was also an escapee from the event. She was dressed moderately plainly. Nothing too flashy. I mean, she did have a low-cut top on, but apart from that, she was rather simple, but in a cute way. But I will say that her kind of greenish auburn hair kind of made it look like she had a bad dye job before coming out. And then all of a sudden, my phone vibrated, which caused me to jump, and I looked down at the screen to see that someone was messaging me on the app. The picture was very familiar, and I looked back up as I saw her wave from her phone at me. There's no way that I can make it across the crowd, but I'd hoped to get to talk to you when I saw you earlier. Looks like we never matched, but I guess that we could still talk. You strike out too? Now, I did seriously consider ignoring her for a moment, but I decided what the hell. I'll give it a shot. What's the worst thing that could happen after all? Yeah. Just not my A game tonight, I guess. I looked at her profile while she typed and saw that her name was Sarah, and she was a changeling, something that I was actually familiar with. Bummer, but I know what that's like. If it hadn't been for my cousin, I wouldn't be here at all. Your profile says that you're a changeling. That's like a fairy, right? Close. Changelings haven't made their choice yet. I'm past due, actually. Most of them choose when they reach puberty, but I haven't been able to make my choice yet. I thought about it for a moment before sending back a response. How come? I have my reasons. Why'd you leave the event? Not finding a good match? I sighed. We were really getting to the heart of the matter here, weren't we? Seems like dating is kind of the same no matter what world you do it in. What about you? Nah. Lots of guys are into the waifu look, but I don't think that anyone actually sees me. I just want a guy who will see me for more than a half fae or a half human, and just sees me for who I am. I nodded, realizing that she wouldn't see it before going back to typing. I get that. Sometimes it feels like I'm half something myself. I'm a mortician for humans and non-humans, but sometimes it feels like my title is all I am. Sometimes I miss the days when I was just a regular old human. Life was easier then. So quit. And I blew out a breath. Yeah, just like that. So simple. It's not that simple. I'm a legacy. I have a name to live up to. I can't just let 7 generations of morticians die with me. Sounds like you're stuck too, then. I suppose I was, but I decided to send something back that would hopefully keep the conversation going. Well, at least I'm not stuck alone. She looked up at me and I saw a smile across her face as She swept her bangs out of the way to get a better look at me. I was just getting ready to walk over there when Cory called out to
Tyler.
me and I turned to wave at him. He was walking out, arm in arm, with Victoria, of all people, and he was grinning from ear to ear. She seemed pretty smiley herself. And as they approached me, he asked me what I was doing out here all by my lonesome. And I looked back at Sarah. But she was gone already, and I looked to the phone to see that she had left the conversation too. And all before I could find a glass slipper to track her down with later. Rats,
Well,
Cory said, looking at Victoria.
you missed the last few rounds. Luckily, you weren't the only one that ducked out early, so people kind of adapted. My last match didn't show, and I got paired with this delightful creature. We've decided to get some dinner later this week.
We sure have.
She said, giving me a look that seemed to beg me not to tell anything unkind about her. And I smiled. She's quite fetching. Victoria, I see you found yourself a good one. And Cory looked between us, not quite sure what to make of our familiarity, but she kissed his cheek and he brightened. Cory, there ain't nothing to worry about, man. I handled her father's funeral, so nothing for you to get jealous over. She's all yours. And with that, she gave him a final kiss and took her leave, telling Cory that they would make plans for later that week. And he practically floated back to the car, and I was really happy for him. It was nice that one of us could come out of this ahead, and I felt like Cory needed the win. I was climbing back into Cory's Prius when my phone jangled, and I looked down to see that I'd gotten one last match. And I was happy to see a girl with greenish auburn hair, slightly sunken eyes, and her name was Sarah, along with a message that said, "Let's go out sometime. We'll talk a little more about being stuck." I smiled. Maybe I hadn't come out of this as badly as I thought that I had.